Have you been managing your own rental property, or maybe have been unhappy with the management company that you've got and you're thinking about a change? The property manager interview process is something that is extraordinarily essential to making the right decision to move forward. Finding the right person, knowing the right questions to ask, anytime you're interviewing anyone for anything, it's important. But when you are ready to trust someone with what may be your largest investment ever, it becomes extra critical. I'm Joe Maggiore, owner and designated broker of Desert Dimensions Properties. We're a full-service real estate brokerage and property management firm based in Scottsdale. Today, we are talking about what questions to ask. So we're a part of that property management interview process often, and we've got some tips on what are the questions that really you should be asking. What are the questions that when somebody asks it, I think to myself, they did their research. They're asking the right questions. That's what we're going to cover today. So interviewing a property manager is very similar to interviewing any professional that you're considering working with. There will be some basic questions that you've probably already thought about asking. Questions like, what is your management style? How often do you communicate with tenants? How often do you visit the property? Those things that kind of everybody already knows. But the reality is there are some more in-depth questions that you're probably going to want to ask to get yourself a much better feel for whether or not this person is the right property manager for you. Okay, so here is my number one most important question. Tell me about your team. Asking a property manager or property management company about the team that they're going to be working with you is incredibly important. It's going to tell you things about the size of the organization, obviously. It will tell you about things like what your customer service experience is probably going to be like, how direct a contact you've got, but it's also going to tell you a lot about how that property manager is able to service your needs, the property's needs. Do they have somebody that is dedicated to maintenance? Do they have agents that are dedicated to showings? How about accounting? Do they have a dedicated accounting professional? Everybody thinks that the one or two mom and pop operation is great because you get that good service, which is true, but what happens if somebody's out sick? What happens if somebody goes on vacation? Asking a property manager about their team is going to be the greatest insight that you can get into what their day-to-day operations are like and how well you're going to be served by those day-to-day operations. One of my favorite questions to ask, how many doors do you manage? When I was new in property management, I used to cringe every time somebody would ask me this because I always thought either I was going to give them a number that was too low and they were going to think I didn't have enough experience, or maybe give them a number that was too high and they were going to think that I was overwhelmed. The reality is, finding out how many doors a property management company manages is extremely important because it also gives you insight into how their team is handling things. What parts of the valley do they operate in? If somebody's got 20 properties and they're all in Scottsdale, that's fantastic if you've got a property in Scottsdale. But if you've got something in Mesa, it may not be as convenient for them and may not serve you as well. So understanding how much that property management company has got on their plate, combined with what their team looks like, is going to give you a really good idea of how well they can serve you. Understanding if they are overwhelmed, if they are bored, if they are somebody who's trying to do everything on their own is really something that you want to know right from the get-go. All right, so I know I'm going to say every one of these are my favorites, but I came up with this list, so they're basically all my favorites. I love to have the question asked, how many tenants have you evicted in the last year? How many tenants have you evicted in the last 5 years? I think there is kind of a disconnect here between people feeling like they want a property manager who is very strict and by the book, and if somebody's not paying their rent, then they're going to get evicted. But really, the number of evictions that a property manager is dealing with in any period of time tends to be a function of how well they've qualified those tenants and how well they've dealt with things that come up, real life, right? Relocations, people losing jobs, medical emergencies that come up. You want to not necessarily just be looking for some really high or really low number. So for example, we very rarely evict. It's not something that comes up often for us. And it is because, and I let people know, we qualify really well. We look for people who are very solid, both in their employment, their rental history. We're looking for solid applicants. But then when people do have real life issues that come up, we try really hard to work with them because an eviction is not necessarily a great thing for anyone. It's not something that we want to put on a tenant's credit or have that carry that, follow along with them for years and years. And it's really not something that's in the best interest of our owners. It tends to be more expensive, lead to more vacancy, it tends to lead to more repairs. So really, you want to look for somebody who's giving you the right answer to that question, not just 4, we evicted 4 tenants. You're going to probably get an answer that says, well, it's pretty rare that we evict tenants, and here's why. That's the information that you're really looking for. Another favorite, how much do you currently have in back rent or past due rent? I had a client ask me this one time, and I was kind of surprised when I got that question. He was expecting a number. He was expecting a pretty significant number because we manage a lot of doors. And when I answered the question, which was 0, he was very surprised at the answer. And really, again, much like the evictions question, what the past due rent question is really speaking to is how well are you qualifying tenants? How are you handling times of stress or, financial hardship? We just came out of the COVID eviction moratorium. How did people handle that? That is a really important question to find out how well your property manager is going to work with people when strife comes along, because it is a given. It's going to happen. And if people can find a scenario where it works out for everyone and they're not carrying a $10,000, $15,000, $30,000 past due rent balance, that is really good for everyone involved. All right, so next, what other services does this property manager offer? Are they somebody who is property management and only property management? Are they a full real estate brokerage who performs property management? These questions really make a big difference because, for one, if you're an investor who's going to be looking at adding properties, there's nothing wrong with having an agent who's helping you find a property, another agent who's helping you manage it. But man, it's really nice to have that all rolled up into one package. I've got numerous clients that I've worked with over the years who have gotten to the point where they're able to say, let's do another one. Here's how much we've got. This much cash down, this much finance. Go find me something that works. What I'm able to do then for that client is find them the right property, know what's going to have to go into it to make it a good rental, because that's something we've got lots of experience with. Professionals are already on board for turnover work, and then we're kind of seamlessly integrating that into marketing and listing the property. So understanding if you're dealing with somebody who is strictly property management or somebody who is property management with other services or full brokerage services, also a really important thing to know going into it. All right. So this one's kind of my favorite, but also my least favorite at the same time. And that is, what do you charge? The reason that this is my favorite is because transparency is fantastic, and transparency is a huge part of what our fee structure is like. The reason that I think this gets kind of to be a weird question for a lot of people is that's not the case with all property managers. Typically, you're going to see a leasing fee, you're going to see a management fee, you might see a renewal fee, but then you start to get into the other fees. And this is something where I think property management has gotten a bit of a bad reputation, because property managers aren't always super upfront with those. So you're going to want to ask questions like, do you charge a startup fee? Do you charge an onboarding fee, a marketing fee, an accounting fee? Are you charging for every check that's written? All of these different things may not be disclosed at your initial conversation. Sometimes they're not even disclosed in management agreements, which is kind of tricky. And then you get a statement and you see all of these things that you've been charged for that really weren't part of that low introductory rate that you thought you were getting. So understanding the transparency behind what is somebody charging is extraordinarily important. The one other piece that's kind of a follow-up to that, you want to ask what is being charged to you as an owner, but you also want to know what's being charged to your tenants. So I have seen property management companies who try very hard to make their pricing look very attractive to their owners, because they're then turning around and charging admin fees up front, lease fees up front to the tenants. I've seen companies that are adding admin fees each month as a function of rental tax, and they're in essence doubling or tripling rental tax. So as an owner, it's really important to know what you're going to pay, but it's also really important to know that you're not going to have a property manager who is then taking your listing and marketing it in a way that is maybe super cost prohibitive to a tenant, or something that looks unattractive to a tenant to want to rent it. What does everything look like? What are the hidden fees? Really, really important to know up front. Okay, so one last point on pricing. Property management is definitely an arena where you do not necessarily want to think that cheapest is best. You want to make sure that you are paying for somebody who can appropriately serve you. Somebody who's got the experience to know what is going to happen in the middle of the night when you've got a pipe that bursts. What happens if your tenant gets relocated 3 months into their 12-month lease. Those are typically not things that come with the bargain basement property managers. Those are things that come with experienced, seasoned professionals who've had the experience, who have really communicated through those things and can look out for your best interest in that scenario. That's where you can pay me now or pay later type of thing. You get somebody who knows what they're doing up front, and that's going to serve you much better than the cheap guy who may really not know what they're doing when exceptions come up. So that's the list. Those are my favorite questions to ask when interviewing a property manager. Again, if you have been managing your own property or been thinking about making a change, this is the stuff that you're going to want to know when you talk to new people. If you're open to giving us a call, 480-270-5355, we are happy to answer any questions, give you a reality check or even a gut check on things that maybe you feel like haven't been going well. We can offer a second opinion, and ultimately we can offer you fantastic property management. I'm Joe Maggiore with Desert Dimensions Properties. If you thought this video was useful, go ahead and hit that like button, give it a thumbs up, and you can of course smash that subscribe button. Thank you, Jen.
Damn.
Yeah.